In this episode, we move into a topic that often sounds more mathematical than it really is, but it is one of the most practical parts of running a security program well. Information security program metrics are simply ways to observe whether important security work is happening, whether risks are changing, and whether leaders have enough information to make decisions with confidence. For a brand new learner, the key idea is not advanced statistics or fancy reporting. The key idea is learning how to turn security activity into something visible, understandable, and useful. A program that cannot explain what is improving, what is getting worse, or where attention is needed will struggle to gain trust from management and from the business. That is why this topic matters so much in the Certified Information Security Manager, CISM, world. Security leadership is not just about setting direction. It is also about showing progress, exposing weakness, and supporting action with meaningful evidence. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A helpful place to begin is by understanding what a metric actually is. A metric is a measurable value that helps show the condition, performance, or trend of something important. In security, that might mean tracking how many critical systems have been patched within the required window, how quickly suspicious events are investigated, or how often employees report possible phishing attempts. The point is not just to count things because counting feels organized. The point is to measure something that helps the organization understand security posture, operational health, or risk exposure in a clearer way. Beginners sometimes think any number is automatically useful, but numbers without context can be just as confusing as having no numbers at all. If a report says there were 50 security alerts this week, that number means very little unless someone also knows whether that is normal, whether the alerts were serious, whether response time was acceptable, and whether the trend is improving or deteriorating. Metrics become valuable when they support understanding, not just activity. It also helps to understand why security programs need metrics in the first place. Senior leaders must make choices about priorities, staffing, funding, technology, vendor support, and risk acceptance, and those choices are stronger when they are informed by evidence rather than guesswork. Metrics help translate security work into information that non-technical leaders can use when deciding where attention or investment is needed. They also support accountability because teams can compare expected performance with actual performance instead of relying on vague impressions. If a security team says patching is under control, leadership should be able to see evidence that supports that claim. If awareness training is supposedly effective, there should be some way to observe whether behavior is changing in the organization. Metrics also help security leaders communicate consistently over time. A single update can be dismissed as anecdotal, but repeated measurement creates a story about trend, direction, and stability that is much harder to ignore. In that sense, metrics are not just administrative artifacts. They are part of how a security program earns credibility. One common misunderstanding is the belief that more metrics automatically create better management. In reality, too many metrics can overwhelm decision-makers and hide what matters most. A mature security program does not try to measure everything equally. It selects a focused set of meaningful indicators that connect to business objectives, risk concerns, control performance, or operational reliability. If a team produces a dashboard with dozens of unrelated values, the audience may become lost in noise and fail to notice the one trend that actually needs attention. Strong metrics are selective, purposeful, and tied to decisions someone might reasonably make. This is why leaders often start by asking what question they are trying to answer before deciding what to measure. Are they trying to understand control effectiveness, compliance with a requirement, exposure to a threat, or readiness to respond to incidents? Once that question is clear, the choice of metric becomes more disciplined. Good metrics sharpen attention, while bad metrics scatter it. Another useful distinction for beginners is the difference between measuring activity and measuring outcome. Activity metrics show that work is happening, which can still be important because many security processes depend on regular execution. For example, The number of access reviews completed on time or the percentage of employees who finished required training tells leadership whether an expected activity took place. Outcome metrics go further by showing whether those activities are actually helping achieve the intended result. Training completion rates may be high, yet employees may still click dangerous links or mishandle sensitive data. An access review may be completed on time, but unnecessary privileges may remain in place because the review was rushed or superficial. This is why security leaders should be careful not to confuse movement with progress. Measuring activity alone can create a false sense of success. The healthiest programs use a mix of activity and outcome measures so they can see not only whether work was performed, but whether that work made security meaningfully stronger. A closely related concept is the difference between leading and lagging indicators. A lagging indicator tells you what has already happened, such as the number of security incidents last quarter or the amount of downtime caused by ransomware last year. Those measures matter because they show results and consequences, but they often arrive after damage has already occurred. A leading indicator gives earlier signs that risk may be changing or that controls may be weakening before a major event happens. For example, a rising backlog of critical vulnerabilities, delayed access reviews, or declining participation in awareness exercises may point toward future problems even if no major incident has occurred yet. Security leaders benefit from both types because lagging indicators show historical performance, while leading indicators support earlier intervention. Beginners sometimes prefer lagging measures because they feel concrete and easy to understand, but relying only on them can make a program reactive. A well-developed metrics approach balances historical evidence with signals that help leaders act before problems become larger and more expensive. As you build an understanding of security metrics, you will also encounter different categories of measures that serve different audiences. Some metrics are operational, meaning they help teams manage daily work such as patch compliance, incident response timing, exception tracking, or backup success rates. Some are tactical, meaning they help managers evaluate whether a particular control area or initiative is improving over time. Others are strategic, meaning they help senior leaders understand whether the overall security program is supporting business objectives, staying within risk tolerance, and maturing as intended. A frontline analyst, a security manager, and an executive do not all need the same view. The analyst may need detailed process numbers, while the executive may need a concise signal about risk trend, resilience, and areas requiring decision or support. This is one reason audience awareness matters in metric design just as much as it matters in writing procedures. The same underlying data can be useful to many groups, but the interpretation and presentation must fit the decision-making needs of the people receiving it. Not every metric deserves a place in a security program, so it is important to know what makes a metric strong. A strong metric is relevant, understandable, consistently measurable, and connected to something the organization can influence or act upon. If a metric is hard to define, hard to collect, or impossible to explain simply, it may create more confusion than insight. Good metrics are also comparable over time, which means the organization can track whether performance is stable, improving, or worsening. That requires consistent definitions and methods. If one quarter measures patch completion differently from the next quarter, the resulting trend may be misleading. Strong metrics also avoid hidden ambiguity. Terms such as timely, sufficient, or high risk sound useful until different teams interpret them differently. Clear definitions matter because the same number can produce very different decisions depending on how the organization understands the underlying measure. In other words, useful metrics are not just numbers. They are numbers supported by discipline meaning. Some of the most familiar measures in security appear under labels such as Key Performance Indicator, KPI, and Key Risk Indicator, KRI. A KPI usually focuses on how well a process, function, or objective is being performed. In a security setting, that could involve the percentage of critical findings remediated within target time or the percentage of vendor reviews completed before contract renewal. A KRI focuses more directly on signals that risk is increasing, decreasing, or moving outside acceptable boundaries. For example, an increase in unsupported systems, repeated control failures, or a growing backlog of unreviewed privileged access requests could act as KRI values. These categories are useful because they remind leaders that not all measurements answer the same type of question. Some help evaluate performance, while others help reveal exposure. A strong security program usually needs both. Performance can look efficient while risk quietly grows, and risk may appear stable while key processes are already slipping. Measuring both helps leadership avoid being surprised by what was technically visible but poorly observed. Choosing the right metrics begins with business alignment rather than with technical convenience. It is easy to measure what systems already produce, but easy data is not always the most meaningful data. Security leaders should start by asking what the organization values, what risks matter most, what obligations must be met, and what decisions leaders regularly face. If a company depends heavily on customer trust, then measures related to data protection, access control discipline, and incident response readiness may deserve special attention. If the company relies on complex third parties, then vendor review coverage, contract security requirements, and remediation of vendor findings may become more important. If resilience is a major concern, then backup integrity, recovery readiness, and incident containment timing may matter more. This business-first approach helps prevent a common mistake in which security teams report what is easy to count instead of what is important to know. Metrics become more credible when business leaders can see a clear connection between the numbers and the realities they care about protecting. Once a useful metric is selected, the next challenge is collecting and interpreting it responsibly. Data quality matters because weak input creates weak decisions, even when the reporting format looks polished. If different teams use different definitions, if records are incomplete, or if data is gathered inconsistently, the resulting metric may create false confidence or unnecessary alarm. Security leaders should therefore think carefully about data sources, calculation methods, frequency of collection, and who validates the results. Just as important, they should understand that one reporting period rarely tells the full story. A single month of poor performance may reflect a temporary surge in workload, a system migration, or a change in measurement method rather than a long-term failure. That is why baselines and trends are so valuable. When leadership can compare current performance against historical patterns or stated targets, the metric becomes far more useful. Interpretation should also consider surrounding conditions. Numbers are most powerful when they are supported by brief explanation, not left to speak in isolation. Metrics can also fail when people unintentionally optimize for the number instead of the real security goal. This happens when teams feel pressure to show improvement and begin focusing on what makes the report look good rather than what reduces risk. For example, if a team is measured only on how fast tickets are closed, it may close tickets prematurely or avoid documenting complex issues that take longer to resolve properly. If awareness success is measured only by training completion, the program may prioritize easy completion rates over actual learning or behavior change. These are examples of poor incentives created by poorly framed metrics. Security leaders must remember that measurement influences behavior, so the choice of metric can shape priorities whether that effect was intended or not. The best defense against this problem is to pair metrics thoughtfully, review them critically, and ask whether reported improvement matches real-world conditions. A metric should guide honest improvement, not create a game where success is defined by appearance rather than substance. Communication is another major part of using metrics well. A valuable metric can still fail if it is shared in a way that the audience cannot interpret or act upon. Senior leaders usually do not need raw technical detail, but they do need clear signals about trend, business impact, and where support or decisions may be required. Operational teams may need more detail because they are the ones adjusting workflows, investigating delays, or strengthening weak controls. Good communication, therefore, involves matching the message to the audience without distorting the meaning. It also means telling the story behind the metric instead of reciting disconnected numbers. If incident response times improved, what changed? If vendor assessment delays increased, what is causing the backlog? If phishing reporting rose sharply, does that show stronger awareness, more attacks, or both? Metrics become more persuasive when they are tied to explanation, trend, and relevance. Leaders are more likely to trust security reporting when it helps them understand what is happening and what action, if any, should follow. Over time, A strong metrics program becomes part of continuous improvement rather than a static reporting exercise. Security leaders should review whether the chosen metrics still match the organization's risks, technologies, operating model, and business priorities. A metric that was useful during one stage of maturity may become less informative later, while new concerns may require entirely different measures. For instance, an organization building its basic capabilities may need simple operational measures at first, but later it may require more strategic measures tied to control effectiveness, resilience, or business risk. Lessons from audits, incidents, tabletop exercises, regulatory reviews, and major projects can all reveal gaps in what the program is measuring. That review process is healthy because security programs should evolve as the environment evolves. Metrics are not supposed to be permanent decorations on a dashboard. They are tools for seeing the present clearly enough to improve the future. The best programs revisit them, refine them, retire weak ones, and introduce better ones as understanding deepens. As we come to the end, the main lesson is that developing and using information security program metrics is really about turning security from a set of intentions into something observable and manageable. Good metrics help leaders see whether important work is happening, whether controls are supporting their purpose, whether risk is shifting, and where decisions should be made before problems grow larger. Poor metrics do the opposite by flooding people with noise, rewarding shallow behavior, or offering numbers that sound precise but lack real meaning. For a beginner, the most important mindset is to treat metrics as decision support rather than as decoration. Ask what question needs answering, what evidence would genuinely help, and whether the measure connects to business reality instead of just technical activity. When a security program chooses meaningful measures, collects them carefully, explains them clearly, and uses them to guide action, metrics stop being just reports. They become one of the clearest ways a security leader understands the program, improves it over time, and helps others trust what the program is saying about risk and performance.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.